Senator Manchin, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
Great to be with you, Kristen.
Really appreciate it. So let's talk about your big decision not to run for re-election. Why did you decide not to run for re-election?
It was a very difficult decision. I love my state. I love the people of West Virginia, and I've been fortunate enough because they've allowed me to work with them for the last 40-plus years. And we've accomplished a lot. I've been House of Delegate member, state senator. I've been Secretary of State. Been governor for 1.5 terms until Robert Byrd passed away. And I thought, we've worked so well together. Maybe if I can take that cooperation that we've learned and how we work together into Washington, it would help. And I got here and things were pretty different. And I've come to the conclusion I've done everything I can do for my state to put it in a position to really go on to the next level. We've got more things and more opportunities coming with all the bills we passed in a bipartisan way. The hydrogen hub, we got Form Energy coming in. We've got our miners' pension and their lifetime guarantees as far as our pension health care. Working together, we did all of that. And I've come to the conclusion you can't change Washington, Congress in Washington from Washington. It's going to have to be the citizens of our great country said, this is crazy. Enough's enough. I can't take any more.
Some of your Democratic colleagues feel as though you were their best hope to hold on to that seat in West Virginia. What do you say to your colleagues who feel let down and worried that Democrats might lose that seat?
Well, I think my state has changed from an overwhelming Democratic state to an absolutely overwhelming Republican state in the shortest period of time. What happened? For somehow they thought the Democratic Party left them because they were hard workers. When you think about West Virginia, you think about people who basically work in the mine to produce the energy this country needs. We mined the coal, made the steel, guns and ships, everything. Patriotism. Our state probably has on a level of more people participating in the government as far as within the military services, sacrifice themselves more than any other state. On the Vietnam Wall, there's more West Virginians per capita than any other state. So we basically shed our blood and given everything we have for this great country. And then they wanted to turn quickly away from coal, and transitions are coming, markets change. They left them behind. So they said, what happened to West Virginia? I was asked that question by a very good friend of mine, and I says, what do you mean? What happened to the West Virginia Democrats? I says, nothing. They've done everything that was asked of them, and now all of a sudden, they feel like they'll be returning Vietnam veteran.
Do you think your seat is going to go to a Republican?
The high probability of that happening is yes, because I know my state, and I know where it's gone, and it's been overwhelmingly Republican. That was not the reason I decided not to run. I've done everything I can possibly do. If I ran again, I intended to win, and I would. I know I would. But I'd work hard. I think the people know who I am. And everything I do, it's not about the party. It's not about being a Democrat or Republican. It's about being an American and a West Virginian.
If Democrats lose their majority by 1 seat, will you have any regrets about your decision?
Democrats won the majority because of me. So I've done everything I can do, and I don't think they're looking at me as, oh, Joe, we're blaming you. I was really contemplating leaving in 2016. And then look what happened. Then we became by the 2018, 2020, and they've been in the majority since then because of an evenly split.
So you won't have any regrets even if Democrats lose their majority?
Yeah, everybody worries about majority and minority. Why don't you worry about the country and doing policy? It shouldn't matter who's in the majority, I got to be honest with you, other than setting the agenda and the way the committees. But if you can work, if you're willing to work in the middle, you can get as much done being on minority or majority if the system works. The system's not working, and that tells you the party system has the control to the point to where it's lost the control of the people and the policies that are needed. That's the problem I have.
Majority Leader Chuck Schumer was asked about your retirement, and he not only predicted the Democrats would keep the majority, he also said he's optimistic, quote, we can gain a seat or two.
That's great.
Do you share his optimism?
Well, you always have to share optimism if they get the right candidates. The Democrats have John Tester, good people. These are people I know in contested areas. They've done a great job and all that. And Kristen Sinema, great to work with. We've been friends and we work together, and her and I have been in that, the two outcasts at times. The only thing I would warn the Democrats, please do not go down the path of getting rid of the filibuster. You lose the filibuster, and you've lost democracy as we know it. If you don't like what's happening in the Senate with a simple majority, where it takes just 218, and that's where it's going to be, then we'll end up like the House. I'm begging my colleagues that are still there now, and maybe new ones to come, please protect the filibuster. That's the process that was put in place that keeps us different than anybody in the world. We are the most deliberate body in government in the world, and there's a purpose for that. And that's really the Founding Fathers. Why did they give every state 2 senators? Why did Rhode Island and Delaware get 2 when Big Bag, Massachusetts and Pennsylvania only had 2? You follow me?
Yeah.
They don't want the big person picking on the little person. And in a state situation such as that, and I've seen it almost being lost.
What did President Biden say to you when you told him about your decision not to run for re-election?
I haven't spoke to him. I spoke to, he's been traveling quite a bit, but I spoke to Steve Ricchetti, and he is his very close confidant, his advisor, and they understood. They didn't want me to leave, and I understand that. But on the other hand, if it's just about having someone because you have the numbers, or do you have someone that basically keeps you from going too far one way or the other? I really believe the parties are in peril right now. They're basically attracting the extremes. And you have to go farther to the left, or be a very liberal person, basically, to confer with, or basically concur with the liberals, far left, or you have to go real far to the MAGA they call it, or for the Tea Party, to the right. I've got a lot of friends in the middle that feel lost. And I'm just trying to say, guys, you either got to fight to take that back.
Let's talk about your future, because obviously you are facing a big decision. Can you take us inside your thinking right now? Are you seriously contemplating a run for the White House?
Here's what I'm seriously contemplating. And I've said this very clearly, but people always want to say, well, are you going to run? I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure and mobilize that moderate, sensible, common sense middle. That could be a center left, center right. So it could be a person who is involved in the grand old party forever. But they basically say, well, my Democrat friends over here, the old blue dog Democrats, the middle's gone. There's not many of us centrists left. And if I can reinvigorate that, and I said, I will do everything that I possibly can. I'm totally, absolutely scared to death that Donald Trump would become president again. I think we will lose democracy as we know it. And my reason for saying that, you can't normalize this visceral hatred, calling people names and attacking people. You can't basically think the only fair election is the one you win, and the only laws pertain to everybody but you. That's not the country we are. That's not how we became the country. And I'm afraid that Joe Biden's been pushed too far to the left. Can he come back? We'll see. But the bottom line is that's not the Joe Biden that we thought was being elected, to go that far left.
I want to delve into all of that with you about former President Trump and President Biden. Before we get to them, I do just want to stick with what your thinking is right now. Just to clarify, just to put a fine point, I know you haven't made any decisions, but are you considering running for president?
I will do anything I can to help my country.
Is that a yes?
And you're saying, does that mean you would consider it? Absolutely. Every American should consider. If they're in a position to help save the country, I think we're on the wrong course. So I will do everything possible. Now, there's a lot of good people out there I hope I can motivate, and a lot of capable people, competent, that they've just given up. I said, don't give up. This is the best country in the world. And we have so much to be thankful for.
And to understand your thinking, are you seriously thinking about running for president, or are you trying to send a message to President Biden, as you just argued? Do you believe he's moved too far left?
People can accept whatever I'm saying. I'm telling you how I feel personally. And I'm telling you, as I move around the country, as I talk to people back home, they said, Joe, enough's enough. I can't take anymore. I don't even watch television anymore. It's too much. And I says, see what's happened here recently in Congress, okay? And the senator, I know him very well. He's a good person, really good person. But what got him to that level, I don't know. But when you see that goes on in the dialogue and people calling each other names and on and on and on, that looks like a banana republic. It looks like basically a third world country. Not the leader of the free world, not the superpower of the free world. And we're better than that.
You've said you're going to make your decision by the new year. Your deadline, you've said, is January 15th.
Well, I made my decision not to seek re-election.
Yes.
And I did that well in advance. I don't know where the next goes. I really don't.
What's your deadline for making a decision about whether you're going to run for president?
I don't think that there would be any deadline from the standpoint, because it's not like you have to get into this primary or this primary season or this, on and on, how the process works. Is there a movement? If there are enough of people are saying, listen, Super Tuesday come and we have what we have. And has anybody moved or changed their position? Has anybody become more civil or more moderate or more centrist? Then you make a decision then.
So you're going to give yourself till Super Tuesday to
decide
you have to whether you get into the race.
Here's the thing. We don't know what the outcome. Right now, it looks pretty obvious that President Biden will be the nominee for the Democrat ticket and former President Trump would be the nominee for the Republican ticket. And that's a difficult situation when you have both parties saying, wait a minute, I'm not sure about this. Does that change at all? If they think there's a viable option, a viable change, or does that viable option threaten them to basically come back to your senses? You can't govern from the extremes. You don't run your life from the extremes. You run your life from pretty much sensible center left, center right. There's nothing wrong with being a Republican or a Democrat, and you shouldn't look at the other side as your enemy. Now, if you want to look at it as your competitor, that's fine, not your enemy. You want to compete with them, but you want to work together to do that.
Are you ruling out running as a Democrat then? Would you only run as a third-party candidate?
Well, the bottom line is I'm as independent as it becomes. I don't know how you get more independent than me. I've never looked and said, well, that's a party line vote, I got to stick with that. If it didn't make sense and I couldn't go home and explain to it, the people I love and I represent, I can't vote for it.
So are you ruling out running as a Democrat?
Well, I'm not even in that frame of mind to where you have to pick where you're going to run from and this and that. I'm saying I want to make sure there's a movement. Maybe I'm by myself. Maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe the people don't think it's not that bad. Everyone I hear from thinks it's that bad. When you have borders that we have, very porous borders, they have to be controlled. You have people that basically could be worker visas, so we had more workers in the country for the right reason. We have dreamers who have been here forever, can't get them into a full workforce.
If you look at the polls, it shows a majority of the people do not want a rematch between former President Trump and President Biden. Is that fueling your consideration of running? And what would it take for you to get to yes?
Well, first of all, it's not fueling me at all. The bottom line is I've tried for 13 years. Nothing's changed. It's gotten worse. The parties have so much control because of the business model they have. And that's what, again, I'll go back to what George Washington said. Beware of the political parties. In his 1796, 224 years ago, he said, beware of the political parties because they will usurp the power from the people.
What would it take for you to get to yes, to say that you are going to run for president?
I have not even thought about that, and I'll tell you the reason why I haven't thought about that. There are so many good, capable people that should be involved. But if they don't have the guts to do it, and if they don't have the credentials to do it, okay, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and wait and say, well, I did the best I could. I'll do whatever I can do to help bring the moderate middle so we govern from the middle and not from the extremes.
You've said you don't think you would be a spoiler. If you look at the polls, it shows that a third-party candidate would take support away from President Biden. What do you say to those who say you would be a spoiler?
I've never been a spoiler in my life of anything, and I would never be a spoiler now. But
if you ran as a third-party candidate?
Everyone's saying this is going to spoil and tip the scales one way or the other. Okay, you have basically Ross Perot. Who would have predicted that Ross Perot would have elected Bill Clinton, tipped the scales to Bill Clinton? I don't think so. Who would have predicted that Bobby Kennedy now, with his support, would tip the scales for Donald Trump, or hurt Donald Trump, I'm sorry, and tip the scales to Joe Biden, since he basically left the Democratic Party? No one can predict these things.
As you sit here today, do you think President Biden and Vice President Harris are the strongest ticket to represent the Democratic Party in 2024?
Not in the centrist part, no, I don't. And they know how I feel. This is not I do not believe that they are basically where Joe Biden has come from. And just go back to the campaign. He's been here for long. He understands the system. And I think he's a good man. And we have good conversations. We just disagree. You're going too far left. I can't go there.
Do you think he should run for re-election?
Well, that's up to him to make that decision. I'm not going to make anybody's decision for him.
Let me ask you about, broadly speaking, part of what you're saying about former President Trump. Some of the language that we have heard from him as of late has gotten a backlash, including the fact that he has called his political rivals vermin. President Biden has described that language.
Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Yeah. President Biden has described that language to Nazi Germany.
It's just horrible language. It's just horrible language. These are constituents. I made a promise to my father over 40 years ago when I first got involved. He didn't want me to get involved in politics. He said, Joe, it's a bad occupation. It's really, really bad. I said, Dad, wait a minute. You've always told me it's the most honorable profession. It takes good people to make it happen. And then I watched as a young boy, 13 years of age, John Kennedy, give his speech. That's not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. We're turning in now to how much more can my country do for me? I never thought my country was my provider. I want it to be my partner. That's where I want, and I try to govern that way, and that's where I think we should be governing. So we're getting to a point now to where that type of language is almost the norm. You're seeing it everywhere. It's normal to call people, to denigrate the system, to attack everybody, and thinking the only fair election is the one I win, and the only laws pertain to someone else, not me. And that is not how we became the country we are, the superpower of the world, and we will not remain that way. That's why I'm concerned and scared.
What would a second Trump presidency mean to the country?
I know. I speak for myself, okay? Taking that type of visceral approach to everything that's sacred, everything that's made us. We're not perfect. The Constitution said a more perfect. We're trying to be more perfect. And we've been trying for a long time. This takes it to another level, to it just destroys everything that we've built to now. And I'm just scared to death that it would basically, as we know democracy, you can't publicly tell someone that if I get reelected, I'll use the power of my office for revenge. Now, it's been said, Maya Angelou said, if someone shows you who they are, and most importantly, if they tell you who they are, believe them. And I believe that's what he would do.
What's your biggest fear about a second Trump presidency based on what you're saying?
Just everything that we talked about here, the democracy we have, the rule of law, the judicial system, which makes us different than everywhere. Madam Justice is blind. She treats you, me, and everyone above and below the same, supposedly. And they're basically putting doubt into that. Only certain people get treated certain ways. That's not who we are. I still believe in the judicial system. I believe in democracy, and I believe this is the people basically who we're representing. We have a republic, and we've chosen to have a representative form of government. That's a democracy.
Let's talk about your views on President Biden now. You have said he goes too far left. What makes you say that? What specific policy
or legislation? I can talk about energy because it's to the point now. We want to bring everything back to America, all the building blocks. Now, whether it be electric vehicles, things of that sort, that's fine, but let's make sure that we can support ourselves in doing it. I basically said this. When Henry Ford started with the assembly line of the Model T, I don't remember going out and saying, well, the government's got to build me filling stations. If the government doesn't build filling stations, we can't invent a car. We can't basically mass produce. Well, that must not. It's the market system. It's capitalism. It's the market. So if you take that concept and now all of a sudden we've got to build, the government's got to do everything for you. And that's the problem I have. We're producing more energy today than we ever have. You don't hear this administration talking about energy security. We're producing 4.6 billion barrels of oil, 37 trillion cubic feet of gas, and also we're doing more wind and solar. You can walk and chew gum in America. It's the United States of America.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. The U.S. did have its best drilling month of the year.
You know how hard that's been to get that done?
Does the president deserve some credit for that?
Oh, well, yeah, they had to let it happen because we forced it in the bill. We wrote the bill to where you have to have a balanced approach. You never hear the administration talking about energy security. You never hear the administration talking about we paid down $230 billion of debt. But yet our debt's running wild at $33.7 trillion. If we don't get our debt under control in the next 10 years, we'll be spending more to service the debt, the interest on the debt, than we will on anything else we spend money on. The military, Social Security, Medicare, all of it.
Let's talk about some of the legislation that you and the president and Congress passed. The Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS, the gun safety law. Do you feel you have a role?
And the Elect Act, you know, basically they save the elections.
Do you feel like you have a role in helping the president talk about some of this bipartisan legislation that you helped to get passed?
I was involved in every piece of legislation you just mentioned, okay, because it's a bipartisan group. We pulled out the bipartisan infrastructure bill out of the infamous BBB, Build Back Better. It was just too much. It was just throwing too much. I think it would have basically thrown us into recession, if not a deep depression. I couldn't be for that. But there was some good in there that we pulled out, and we made that a bipartisan bill. And we put it on the agenda, and it passed. And the Electoral Count Act. I don't care what anybody tells you. I was in that Capitol on January the 6th. Me, being the optimist, I thought it was a friendly visit, just a lot of rowdy, friendly visitors. It was not a friendly visit. They did not come to sit down and talk about concerns they had and why they were upset. They came to destroy the process of orderly transfer of power. That was their intent. We prevented that from happening. I need it.
Tea? Let's get some tea. Take a minute. Yep.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. We'll start over on that.
No. But I do want to hear your thoughts about January 6th. So let's.
Okay. January 6th was not a walk in the park, and it wasn't a friendly visit. They came to basically destroy the orderly transfer of power, change it. And you would think, in the most divisive time, we couldn't come to agreement, Democrats and Republicans, how we're going to fix it. We started sitting down and talking. We're talking about changing how the voting and people that basically have election law reforms and all the different things. We couldn't get there. That was too much. We finally said, what's our purpose for being here? To make sure that never happens again. And we did come to that. We made sure that that's strictly a ceremonial. Vice President will never have the powers that they might have interpreted he might have had. They can never interpret that now. So Susan Collins and myself, with all of our colleagues, sit down and work together. You can get good things happening. They said, well, how did you get so much done in the 117th Congress? We were 50-50, Kristen. We were 50-50. You had to do something. We decided to work together.
Do you worry that that bipartisan spirit will be lost to some extent when you leave, when your colleague Senator Romney leaves?
He's a dear colleague and a dear friend, and Mitt and I get along great. We work together almost every time as a bipartisan group. You can be sure that Mitt and I will be there because we think that way. It's tough. There's other people. I'm trying to get that new generation. That's my responsibility. That should be Mitt's, all of us. How can we get more people involved that look at solving problems and going for the reason of public service, not self-service? And how do we basically usurp some of the power that these parties, this is big business, okay? The Democrat business and Republican business is doing just well and very, very good in Washington, okay? Not so good around the country because now we have red states and blue states. What happened to the red, white, and blue state?
I know Senator Romney dismissed this idea, but did the two of you ever talk about running together on a ticket?
No, we talk all the time, okay, about different things, how it can be done, this and that and everything else, but something has to be done. I said, Mitt, if they just hear us talking about how we accomplished so much in the 117th Congress and what can be done, what's the possibility? But when you fall into up here that if you're a Democrat, you're supposed to vote all the time. They keep a record on what your voting percentage is. You know how they score your record? Most of it's done on confirmation. So if the Democrats are in power, and there's people coming across, they're well qualified and good, the Republicans are expected to vote against them. So it shows I'm always against the president, the Democrat. If the Republicans were in power, then the Democrats are supposed to vote all against their confirmation. That takes your percentage up and down. I would cross over and I said, if the person's well qualified, I'm fine. If they're not qualified, I don't care what party you should have them.
I want to zoom out a little bit, just listening to what you're saying. Do you think it's time for a new generation of leaders in this country?
You're asking me, do I believe in term limits?
Well,
absolutely. Absolutely. And let me tell you why.
And when you look at the age of the current president, the former president,
Forget
you
the
also
ages.
are in your 70s.
Forget the ages. Let's go term limits.
Okay.
Because that would solve a lot. Term limits is this. I never did, years ago, never believed in term limits. I thought you had to have the experience and expertise and this and that. And I'm having a town hall meeting in beautiful West Virginia. And there had to be 200 or 300 people. And a little lady, older lady, got up and she says, Joe, she says, I believe there should be term limits. And I says, please tell me why. And we talked, and I was giving her all my reasons why we shouldn't. And she said, maybe if we had term limits, we get one good term out of you. That hit me like I couldn't, she was right. Maybe we could get one good term out of everybody, not worrying about getting reelected. Wouldn't it be something if we had Supreme Court as one 18-year term? We had President as one 6-year term. We had the Senate as 2 6-year terms, and the House at 6 2-year terms.
Well, and you take me to my next question. Do you think President Biden is physically and mentally up for another term in office? We have
great conversations. I don't have a problem with the conversations, okay? When you get a little age on you, you don't move as quickly as you did before, and they sometimes evaluate that you know, that now you can't even think. I've never had that problem. I've never had, when I met with Joe Biden, it's always been a very, very active engagement.
When you look at the polls that show that former President Trump is beating President Biden in some of the key battleground states, do you think that raises questions about his ability to win?
Nope. I think this, and I'm very clear on this, I think that basically he is not talking about the things he's done that really protects the middle, the things we did in bipartisanship, the intentions of the bills that we did and how they were enacted. You cannot implement a piece of legislation you didn't pass. I'll give you a perfect example, is the Inflation Reduction Act. Not once have you ever heard it was an energy security. We're producing more energy. That bill forced us to produce more energy because you know why? Putin declared war on Ukraine, and he used energy as a weapon and put all of our allies in Europe in peril. We had to produce. We weren't able to help them. We started producing. That's when I got involved and we started writing the IRA bill. And $35 for basically insulin. Letting Medicare negotiate for lower prices. Bringing in more oil and more natural gas. We brought the price of gasoline down. Inflation was 9% when we passed it. We're at 3.3. But that's the middle. But you have to play to the far left because that's where they think the base is.
Well, let me ask you this. In terms of what Congress and the White House are facing right now, obviously aid to Israel and Ukraine was not included in this effort to keep the government open. How critical is it, do you think, that Congress passes this supplemental aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine by the end of the year?
And border security.
And border security.
We have to have border security.
Do you think Congress
And the Democrats have not been strong on border security. I'm very strong on it, but also I'm compassionate on worker visa programs. We've got people here that could be working, paying their own way and paying taxes. And if not, we're just putting up and spending billions of dollars. That's wrong.
Do you think that aid to Israel and aid to Ukraine and border security should all be linked?
Absolutely.
Do you think it can get done by the end of the year?
I think it can be done in a reasonable way as long as we have a good border security, as long as we have holding people accountable for the money that we're assisting them with. I think showing that in a very transparent way, I absolutely do. The horrible thing would be is, are we picking? Which one are we picking? Israel over Ukraine or Ukraine over? Both of them are so important. We're doing everything we can to keep from being drawn into a major war. And right now, if we don't support Ukraine, that could happen. And if we don't make sure that Israel is successful, that could happen. And Israel is going to take the Arab and Muslim countries to govern that. All we can do is give them some protection until they can get their feet under them.
Do you think it can get done by the end of the year? Does it have to get done by the end of the year in your estimation?
I think that we need to get done quicker, sooner than later, and the reason for that, because this aid is needed. And we've all come to that agreement. Democrats and Republicans, there's a small minority that are holding things back. And new Speaker Rogers, I don't know him. I want to get to know him. Give him a chance to lead. He basically passed the extenuation of the CR with more Democrats and Republicans. You've got to find coalitions that make the government work, not playing to the party. And basically you're an outlier if you don't do everything on the strict party lines. That's the problem we have.
You think Speaker Johnson's doing a good job?
I don't know about that. I think Speaker Johnson is moving the ball forward. Give him a chance. Okay? Everyone's now assuming this, and this. He's only been there. Can you imagine 4 or 5 weeks ago where he was and where he is today? Give a person a chance. That's all. And then, you know, if a person tells you and shows you, then believe him. He's trying to do things. He comes from a very conservative district he represents, and he's a very conservative person. Nothing wrong with that. Now you can't lead from the extreme. He'll have to figure that one out.
Senator Manchin, as you think about the fact that you're not running for re-election, what do you hope your legacy in the Senate will be?
That I think that my voting record will show, in all the things we've accomplished, that we did it with everybody. We did it with each other. I didn't do it by myself. I was always so excited when I saw other people seeing the problems the way I did. And when I saw that, we're going to make something happen good. And when you think about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, the energy bill that we did, the Electoral Count Act, all the things that we had problems, and we solved those. And then people said, we might have gone overboard and there's too much and thrown too much out there. I just don't think that basically the American public should expect the federal government to be sending them checks. I don't remember the Great Depression. I hear my grandparents talk about it all the time. They probably became Democrats because they looked at FDR, who gave them the ability to save their family and prosper. So with that being said, they were still very, very grounded. But I look at it from the standpoint of FDR never sent a check to anybody that I've ever read in history. Not one penny. He sure gave them a lot of opportunities, though. But they had to work. It was all based around work, the value of work, and the value of accomplishing something, and the self-pride that you have, and the character that you build within. And if people keep saying this, how much more can my country do for me, versus what John Kennedy's speech said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, that's what we're missing.
And Senator, I know we have to wrap up, but before we go, if you can just give us your gut check. As you sit here today,
I wish I had a gut check to give you.
Are you leaning toward running?
I'm scared to death of where my country is and where it's going. I'm scared there are people in power that are pushing us to the edges. They don't run their life that way. I can assure you they didn't become successful that way from the extremes, and we cannot continue to govern from the extremes.
Right now, how do you see your role in fixing the critical challenges that you have laid out?
I think if I can mobilize, really mobilize, people that feel like I do. They're concerned, but they know we can fix it. This is the United States of America. There's never been a challenge that we couldn't fix.
You sound like a presidential candidate.
I don't care what I sound like. I am an American. That's the most important. There's other people that sound like me. Maybe they haven't spoken. Maybe they're afraid of retaliation because they're supposed to be in a party system. And if they don't speak just exactly where they think the party has gone or where the party wants them to go, right or left, then they'll be an outcast. Trust me, being an outcast is not that bad. As long as you're fighting for bringing this country in united. Americans together is what people want to be. We are the United States, not the divided states.
Thank you, Senator. Anything I missed? Anything else
Oh,
you'd
my
like
God,
to add?
I don't think there's anything you could have missed.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.